tailgate, then went to another one. But let's get back to the point.
So
Let me get back to the point. No.
Kicking a tailgate 11 days prior is justification to kill somebody?
Okay, there's an ongoing investigation. The point is,
but
if law enforcement would have done its job by arresting him and enforcing the law, he wouldn't have been at the second protest where he was trying to get in the middle of a federal investigation, which is a bad idea.
He was holding his camera and he was approached by ICE.
What happens when a gotcha attempt completely backfires on live television? In this clip, News Nation host Katie Pavlich appears ready to corner Brian Tyler Cohen with a sharp line of questioning. The setup feels deliberate. The tone suggests she believes she has the upper hand. But then something unexpected happens. Instead of stumbling, Brian calmly introduces a statistical fact, one that directly challenges the premise of the question. And in that moment, the entire dynamic shifts. The argument loses its footing, the momentum changes, and what was meant to be a trap turns into a very uncomfortable reversal. Watch the full exchange closely. I'll hold my analysis until the end, because once you see how it unfolds, the turning point becomes impossible to miss.
Brian Tyler Cohen, progressive YouTuber. Brian, great to see you again. Thanks for coming back on the show.
Thanks for having me.
Do you think that the dancing is really a productive way to get reforms of ICE that the left is calling for?
I think everybody should speak out in the way that they can be most effective. And so if dancers want to dance, then good on them. If there are students who want to walk out, good on them. If there are legislators who want to actually do something, good on them. We can all do our part. And I don't think that we should be, saving smoke for people who are trying to, offer up what little they can to draw attention to this, when there are other people who are just basically apologizing for ICE's overreach.
I mean, I do agree. I mean, I'm glad that they're not screaming and interrupting federal investigations
or shooting people in the face, for example.
Or operations where ICE agents are trying to go in and remove pedophiles and rapists and murderers from communities, blowing whistles in their ears. I agree. I'm glad that dancing is a better form of peaceful protest. But last week, we saw an unprovoked attack on a mother in an unpeaceful protest, leaving her covered in bruises. She was outside of a school and attacked by kids who were not in school. Why is the left radicalizing these students to not only leave school, where the country has a 54% rate of not being able to read, in order to go out and then attack people who are just asking them to calm down?
Yeah, I mean, look, I agree that literacy scores in this country are pretty dismal. And in fact, the lowest literacy scores in this country are in red states run by Republican governors and Republican legislatures. So I definitely think that's a big problem to consider. I mean, if you look at places like Oklahoma, for example, if you look at places like Arkansas, I mean, these are, Mississippi, Louisiana, these have the lowest test scores in the country. But that, I'm assuming that's not what you want to speak about.
I'd be happy to talk about Mississippi. It's actually much better than the majority of the blue states in this country in terms of education. It's actually a great story about education, but that's not about ICE, which is what we're talking about now.
Yeah, that's fine. I don't think you really want to have an argument about the test scores in red states versus blue states. But
I'd be happy to have you back to have that conversation. But I don't think kids should be leaving school to go and protest ICE when they can't read, write, or do arithmetic.
Look, I think that we have a very important First Amendment right in this country, and if kids want to use what platform they have to step out of school to protest the overreach of a tyrannical government and a lawless rogue agency, then I support their ability to do that. Again, look, you're going to find individuals who are going to be violent, and you're never going to see me defend anybody who brings violence into the situation. So I'm not going to defend that. And certainly, there are people everywhere who are going to resort to violence, and I think you and I can both agree that that's not acceptable.
I would agree,
regardless of where it happens. Yeah. But if in terms of kids walking out of school, I'm completely I think civics in this country is obviously very important, and if kids are going to be paying attention to politics, paying attention to what's happening in their country, I think that more power to them if they can walk out. I think if athletes at the Olympics have something to say and use that platform, more power to them. The more people that can speak up. I mean, I am not of this mind that had gained a lot of traction in Republican circles, where athletes are just supposed to shut up and dribble. We have a long, proud history in this country of people like athletes, for example, standing up at the Olympics, going back decades and decades and decades.
Yeah, well, it's good that they live in a country where they have those rights. That is true. It's good they live in a country where they have those rights.
And I think one of the most important rights is not to succumb to a tyrannical government. And in fact, that's something that you've been saying for years and years and years. I'm looking at a tweet from 2013. Anybody who believes the United States can never be a tyrannical state has their heads in the sand. So that issue used to be important to you, and yet now you have a rogue agency killing people with impunity. We're not going to see any justice for Renee Good. We got
to take a second and take a step back. Okay, first of all, Renee Good arguably tried to run over an ICE officer with her car. So you say that you're not for violence. There's lots of video showing that she almost ran him over.
We know what it looks like when somebody turns the steering wheel to the right.
In terms of the issue of tyranny, you brought this up last time you were on the show, so I'm happy to bring it up again.
What about Alex Preddy?
Well, there's Alex Preddy was at a protest 2 weeks prior, ICE, and got violent with the officers, kicked out a tailgate, then went to another one. But let's get back to the point.
So kicking a tailgate 11 days prior is justification to kill somebody?
Okay, there's an ongoing investigation. The point is, if law enforcement would have done its job by arresting him and enforcing the law, he wouldn't have been at the second protest where he was trying to get in the middle of a federal investigation, which is a bad idea.
And he was approached by ICE.
Not to mention that officials, including the lieutenant governor in Minnesota, were telling people to go out and put their bodies on the line to commit felonies by getting in the middle of federal investigations, which is a terrible idea.
By ICE agents. We all saw the video of Alex Preddy being approached by ICE agents.
We also saw the video of him weeks prior agitating and getting violent with ICE agents, which you just said that you're against violence.
Kicking somebody's car is not justification to be murdered.
Getting involved in the middle of a federal investigation is a felony, okay?
Do you think kicking someone's car is adequate justification?
Democrats telling children to leave school when they cannot read or do math, which is going to be detrimental for their future, telling them to leave school to go protest ICE with no end in sight, and telling people to put their bodies on the line, as they did with Renee Good and Alex Preddy, is not a good way to change things in Washington. The way you do that is by coming to D.C. and talking about the differences and what they want to change. I would have loved to talk to you about that tonight, but you wouldn't let me get to the point. So Brian Tyler Cohen, it's great to have you. Thank you for coming on the show. Next time, hopefully.
That ending. It wasn't accidental, it was abrupt for a reason. The moment Brian Tyler Cohen introduced the literacy statistics, the tone of the interview shifted. What was framed as a confident challenge from Katie Pavlich quickly turned defensive, because the numbers he cited weren't vague talking points, they were specific rankings. States like Mississippi, Louisiana, Arkansas, and Oklahoma consistently appear near the bottom in national education metrics. And once that entered the conversation, the original argument lost its edge. Instead of continuing down that path, the discussion pivoted, then it spiraled, then suddenly it ended. That's usually what happens when a debate stops being about rhetoric and starts being about receipts. The strategy seemed clear: shift the focus, regain control, move away from uncomfortable data. But the damage was already done. The contrast between confidence at the start and the early sign-off at the end said more than any closing statement could. When commentators come prepared with evidence instead of just energy, the dynamic changes. Accountability feels very different when it's live. And in this case, the attempt to corner the guest appeared to backfire, visibly. What do you think? Was it a strategic cut-off or just a conversation that ran its course?